Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Tech Talk. I'm your host, Matt Presti. The Tech Talk platform is a side chat, a fireside chat to the main tech podcast. This is episode number 5. My guest today is Ben Pollard. He is the curator of mightyfineoaks.com, and we met at an Acapulco in Acapulco, Mexico. He attended the workshop that I gave on the science of Walter and Leo Russell, and we had a great conversation. We decided to record it. I'm glad we did because the theme is trees, and trees have a lot to do with several of my last podcasts, interestingly enough, but I think you guys will really enjoy this. There's supporting video to go with it. Take a look into the work of Benedict Pollard. Contact him if you want. He's a great guy, and sure he'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys enjoy this and have a happy day. Spring is on the way, so stay tuned. Get yourself in gear and get busy. This is a year to produce. Enjoy your day.
There's a feeling, there's this almost undefinable quality, a presence, an energy that oak possesses.
Strong individual, looking after lots of others as well as themselves. You'd want to be an oak if you could choose.
Oaks are really important to the environment around them. In the UK, they host over 2,000 different species of wildlife.
Oaks are everyone's best friend.
And oaks, certainly in Britain, are amongst the oldest living trees. Broad oak is the tree behind me. I've been told that it's about 640 years old.
They're very recognisable as a species in the UK.
We've also become more aware of their rarity and that Britain does have a particular responsibility. We've got a high density of these big old oaks.
It would be heartbreaking to imagine a world without oaks.
I have 40 experimental trees dotted around the wood, and I'm recording their microclimate conditions, I'm recording their acorn production each year, I'm taking canopy photos, and I'm also doing a pollination experiment to try and work out the sort of best pollen source for acorn production. Generally, my research aim would be to suggest ways in which we could get a more regular acorn crop in the UK, or at least be able to predict when we're going to get mast years. Masting is basically a reproductive strategy of oaks when you'll have a year of high acorn production. That will often be followed by a year or multiple years of low acorn production. So it is this sort of boom and bust approach. Oaks in the UK, they naturally regenerate quite poorly, so we need a sort of understanding of how we can collect more acorns, how we can ensure that we have a good supply so that we can include them in projects of regeneration.
My latest love is a project where I collect acorns from ancient oak trees, and I'm growing them on. Later this year, we're going to be working together to create a new woodland called Bearwood. Trees grown from resilient old oaks, they're likely to survive, they're likely to thrive. And that's what I hope will happen with the new woods that are planted here. The oldest oaks have been around for centuries, and it's interesting to consider how they can help us connect to the past. There's something kind of magical about that.
All right, so we both attended an Acapulco, which was pretty cool, wouldn't you say? How would you describe the whole event?
It was cool. It was my first one, and I thought it was very well organized. It was very peaceful, kind of somehow it felt felt well structured and some really interesting speakers, really interesting talks, and yeah, I don't have a single complaint. So that's good.
Yeah. So what's your travel time from, you say you're near, well, you're in the UK, obviously, near Oxford.
Hmm.
Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm actually in a little village called Freeland, which is a good name for someone who goes to an Acapulco. Um, quite how free it is here, I'm not sure, but um, yeah. So, well, I had an interesting flight back yesterday, which I got to Mexico City Airport, and there were huge queues everywhere. And I
Hmm.
spoke to this lady from San Francisco who said that the volcano had erupted, so all the internal flights had been cancelled
Oh
or
my.
delayed. So it's kind of chaotic, but um, yeah, interesting.
Wow.
And then yeah, just easy flight back, 10 hour flight back.
Hmm. There were a lot of tremors and little mini earthquakes too during
Right,
the event. So that's interesting that the volcano, that whole thing's, I guess it's all related in my mind.
right. Well, it was interesting seeing the devastation still from the Cat 5 hurricane from last October, and
Oh
then the
man, yeah.
earthquakes. I mean, the middle earthquake was that was a new experience for me. That was quite a tremor, I thought.
Yeah,
Although the Californians say that was just a foot massage, is what they call it.
right, right.
Um, yeah, so there's interesting earth changes going on for sure.
Hmm. Well, I was just looking over your site. I'll hit the share screen here, but this is a very cool site, and you are basically a curator of mighty fine oaks. I guess you could put it that way. But why don't you tell me a little bit about that? That's a beautiful tree. I love the photos of all these old English oaks. Just incredible.
Hmm.
What got you into this?
Well, actually, that tree there that you can see on the screen now, um, so that's actually at the school that I went to. So I was at that school from age 13 to 18, and my sport at school was running, cross country running and track. And we used to run, trying to give you a sense of scale of that tree. So the branch that emanates out and is, I think we call it procumbent on the ground, we
Mhm.
used to run under that. So between the trunk of the tree and the branch,
Right.
that's a good that's a good 3 meters gap there to give you an idea of scale. So people can
Wow.
easily run under there. So we used to see that tree pretty regularly. Now that tree measures around I think it's 9.4 meters in girth, measured at about 1.5 meters above the ground, which makes it there's 125 oak trees in England over 9 meters. So that's one of the largest oaks in England. Um, and that was the first tree that I went to when this idea came to me. So this kind of idea came to me one day to collect the acorns from very old oak trees in England. I've loved oak since I was a young boy. We
Hmm.
had some nice big oak trees in our garden that I used to adore and climb. I used to climb them quite regularly.
Same
Um,
here.
and this idea came to me to collect the seeds and grow them on. And that was the first tree I went to. It's funny, it's like one of those ideas of how do you begin something? And often people, you know, well, myself, certainly, I can speak from personal experience. It's like, how do you begin a new project? Like, how do I do it? And I can't remember how long I'd had this idea gestating. And then one day the thought came to me, well, it's really easy. All you have to do is go and collect some acorns from a tree. It's that easy.
It
And I
starts
thought,
with a
oh yeah,
seed, right?
that's right. I thought oh yeah, that's so easy. I was in my mind, this was such a big thing. It was so hard to know where to begin. And I just thought, oh, so all I have to do is email my old school, who I was in touch with anyway, And they said, sure, come and collect some seeds. So that's where that began.
Excellent. Now, do you collect individual acorns from each of these trees and then starter those and then help to plant them or transfer? What is the process? I imagine it's pretty involved.
So again, so my kind of background is I have a degree in botany,
Uh-huh.
and I've done a lot of work in tropical conservation, but I've always been a horticulturalist as well. And during my university holidays, talking 30 years ago now, I used to work for a nursery where I learned various different horticultural skills. And the owner of the nursery was a chap called Douglas,
Mm-hmm.
and he loved oak trees. And I knew about this other nursery where the chap specialized in oak trees. And there's a species of oak, which I think is actually from America, Quercus douglasii, Douglas's oak. And I thought that would be a great present to buy the owner of the nursery for his birthday was a Quercus douglasii, or Douglasii, I think it is. And so I went down to this other nursery in the West Country of England and bought one of those trees. So when I started my project, I thought I wasn't sure how to germinate the acorns. I don't really have the land myself. I don't have the space.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I reached out to this other nurseryman and I said, would you be interested in, I don't know, say growing 1,000 acorns for me each year? Take them up to, let's say, 2 years old, and then I'll take them off your hands. And he agreed. And he's been growing oaks for, gosh, 60 years. So he just turned
Wow.
90. So him and his wife, who I think is slightly older than him, in fact. So, these are nonagenarians still going strong, running their own plant nursery, really, really knowledgeable people. And he still grows trees, some of the trees for me. And then the idea is I grow them on into, I call them oaklings, so oak saplings. But I've come up with my own word, oaklings, and I grow them on in containers. They're all in pots, and then they're available for sale. Sometimes I donate some as memorial trees or for uh, other reasons, or sometimes for weddings. So I exchanged a tree for as a gift to go along to someone's wedding and take part in all of those celebrations. Um, yeah, so I'm kind of exploring how best to get these trees out into the landscape at the moment in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, so when you were in an Acapulco at the event, did you actually give a presentation? Were you one of the presenters? Because if
No,
so, I missed it.
I'm
If not,
no, I was an attendee.
okay, okay. Have you? I'm sure you've done a presentation or two on your work. I'd imagine. It looks like you have a video on your site.
Well, the interesting thing is, I actually it's been a bit like an oak tree, this project, as in it's slow growing. And
Hmm.
of course, what I wanted to do is build up a stock of trees because I have a feeling this is going to go somewhere quite big.
Hmm.
And didn't want to do is, let's say, become well known and people are interested and it becomes popular and then all my oak trees are gone. So I'm building up a big stock. So this is year 9 now,
Oh
and I have
wow.
about 5 or 6 thousand trees growing, all different sizes and ages. Um, but as it happens, my first talk about the project is actually this evening. So
Okay.
it's very timely that we're having this conversation because I haven't finished preparing my lecture yet. It's mostly there, but it could do with a little bit of structuring. Um, but one of the reasons I reached out to you is I was certainly very interested in the work of Walter and Lau. Is it Lau or Leo Russell?
It's pronounced either way. But yeah,
Okay.
Lao usually is the pronunciation that more in the English, and the Western more of the Lao pronunciation.
Okay. So I knew about them before the conference, and I actually have a home study course,
Oh,
which
wonderful.
I've had for a year or two, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm kind of so the Oak project is multi levels. There's a very much there's the superficial, tangible, visible project of I grow oak trees and sell them, which is obviously important to keep the whole thing financially sustainable
Mm-hmm.
and to engage with people. Then there's, as I say, tonight I'm giving a lecture, then I have another one in a couple of weeks. I'm also talking at a festival in the summer. So that side of things just starting to pick up a little bit. And one of the things I'm really interested in, I've done a lot of so-called spiritual work or research over the years in different formats, be it what is called core shamanism in the tradition of Michael Harner and Sandra
Mm-hmm.
Ingerman. I've also spent time in Central Africa living with tribal people and apprenticing to an elder there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could say my sort of main so-called spiritual practice is the shamanic journey work. And I've learned in different ways of there are different ways of communicating with nature and with trees and with spirits, if you like, in that way. Um, and I also recently came across a chap in England who I think's in his 80s who he dowses with trees. So he uses dowsing rods to locate what he calls beacon trees, which are often oak in England. So oak or yews are the two very special old trees that we have here in the UK. They're the longest lived, and they appear to be doing some sort of job of energetic, holding high energy frequency. So, with regard to Walter and Laura Russell, I was interested particularly in how they use oak in some of their writing. Um, so I have one of the slides I was actually going to present tonight is from Lau's work. God will work with you, but not for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of what I was really interested in discussing with you was it feels like this whole oak project that I'm involved in is it's like the doors just keep opening and I just walk through. I don't seem to be having to do too much in a sort of effortful way,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time I'm doing what I need to do,
Right.
So I'm collecting the seeds, I'm paying respect to the trees, growing the trees, looking after them, caring for them, making sure they all have what they need in terms of water and food and pruning and potting and so on. And exploring how to bring this kind of message of something deeper to the people. And that feels a little bit like what I'm being asked to do is to show people there's more to it than what we see with our own eyes.
Sure.
So there's this page that I've got that I'll talk about this evening. It says along the lines of uh, to illustrate my meaning, think of an acorn. In the center of that acorn is the soul of what can unfold into a 50-ton oak tree, because the soul of the oak has unfolded and refolded that particular pattern for millions of years. Uh, Likewise, your soul has governed and controlled the unfolding of your body from your single cell beginning. So I'm kind of interested in how to. It very much reminds me of the workshop that I did with you in an Acapulco of this inhalation and exhalation, the giving and the re-giving, and I'm kind of interested in perhaps you could speak to that a little bit of understanding more what that kind of means and what maybe you see in regard to what I'm doing, how that perhaps works or translates, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's I guess the idea of the oak, and we have to go back a little bit, but Walter Russell, for people that don't know, his first illumination occurred underneath his favorite oak tree in the middle of the
Wow.
woods. And he writes about that in Unit 2 of the home study course. It's called the Story of My Illumining, I think is the title of the chapter. And he writes how, he was playing marbles with the kids at 7 years old, and suddenly he felt a strangeness, a calling. And so he abruptly gathered his marbles and left the circle of kids and wandered into what he called was his favorite spot in the woods, which was underneath a massive oak tree. And there he began to have this illumination experience envelop him at the age of 7, right around his birthday. He said every year that would happen, and every 7 years it would be a major experience. But myself included, at the age of 9, I was called to climb this massive oak tree in my backyard. It had to be 100 feet tall, and it took 4 people to put their hands around it. One of those big ones, and it always called to me to come climb to the top of it. I eventually got up there, and it was a very small world looking down. People looked like, the size of ants when you're up that high looking down things. But so oaks, yeah, definitely in my own life, I have a certain connection. Walter Russell definitely had a connection. You've got a connection. And I think what you're asking is when you think of the acorn inside that image, there's an image inside of that acorn, and that's the soul of the acorn, which is destined to become what that image is. And all you have to do is allow the light to shine through that image, and you build it. It doesn't just spring out of the acorn into a 50-ton, 100-foot tall oak tree. It'll take 50 to 100 years, for that image to concretize, to become viewable and witnessable by your senses. But it's really a process, the breathing in and breathing out. The trees breathe in, they breathe out. Everything in existence that is a living body, even inert matter that we would think otherwise, like minerals or even chemical elements, have a breathing cycle. So it's a very interesting way to look at it, but everything is built by breath. Each breath you take, an inhalation and an exhalation, builds the foundation for the next one and the next one. And with every breath, chemical reactions, every out breath, chemical reactions, and so on and so forth. But breath is really the life cycle of all things. So in anything that's building its body, and it takes time, of course, and a periodicity of effects have to occur. But I think he's saying that the idea of the oak is purposeful, and so it must unfold the same way he had to unfold his own image as an artist or a scientist, or to be a sculptor. He had to decide at 56 years of age that he's going to do, completely switch his vocation from painting over to sculpting, which he had never done. And all his artist friends said, that's not a good idea. You're not just going to pick up sculpting having never done it, when you've been a painter your whole life. And he said, basically, watch me. So that just goes to show you that even if you've already unfolded into a certain path, like you can be a clerk for 30 years, you could be a librarian for 40 years, and then suddenly decide that, what, my true love is knitting, or it's raising oak trees, or it's music. And you can just as quickly unfold in that progression, in that choice, as you would, but the things that really carry forward the fastest are the things that we're really meant to do. It seems as if the whole universe lines itself up, and it's one continual synchronous event where the more synchronicities you experience in your life, the more you're on the right track, is what I would say to people. And that may be what you're experiencing, that these opportunities are opening. You've got this talk tonight. Here we are having this conversation, which was pretty sudden. I've had two conversations in the past week that are basically all synchronous on my podcast platform. And we just talked prior to hitting the record button here that we maybe should record this, and I throw it up on the podcast platform on the Tech Talk would be an ideal thing to do, because so great are these conversations. I've had so many that I wished I would have recorded, because they're really helpful to hear what others are out there in the world doing, how someone like a Walter Leo affects their work, and then also just where they're trying to take their life. And that stuff is really some of the most helpful meat that people can absorb from a podcast. Is we all struggle, we all work toward our goals, but there's these certain little golden nuggets of advice that come along, or recall or remembrance, things that come to us that just help us each to further unfold what our true purpose is here.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think I better revisit the home study course. Perhaps I haven't been doing it properly, because I think I may have missed that his Walter's illumining was from under an oak tree. And
Yeah.
people have said to me recently, I need to spend more time with these oaks.
Mm-hmm.
And I do approach them when I collect the seeds. I do approach them consciously and with respect,
Mm-hmm.
and I do connect with them with a sort of inner visioning. And it's interesting. There was one tree that refused to allow me to approach it for a couple of years. I went back each year, and eventually it accepted. And that was a genuine feeling. That wasn't me projecting something from inside.
That's
This
very
was something
interesting.
that was, yeah. It's like, no, I called it grumpy oak for a bit.
Right.
But maybe it was teaching me a lesson to be even more respectful and even more present, and not just assume that it's okay and that I need to take this seriously. Um, and something that I'm kind of developing a little bit, this whole idea of these high energy oaks. It's almost like I'm being called to help facilitate plant the offspring of these trees around the country here in England, to help kind of raise the vibration. It's almost like they're creating a sort of grid. And my understanding is that everything is in, not everything, but it's important with the correct intention. That can be very empowering. So if I'm collecting an acorn from an oak with intention to bring the energy and wisdom of that parent tree into each oakling, given that kind of fractal in a way, like you say, the image is within the seed.
Mm.
So presumably, with intention, the energy could be to the same degree, perhaps on some level within the seed. And that's how I see it. And it's I'm not quite sure how to put it, but it's some sort of service to the land to help raise the frequency, which seems to be uh, what maybe is needed these days.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. You're sort of a facilitator almost. You
Hmm.
speak for the trees, like the
Right.
Lorax. Remember the Dr. Seuss? I speak for the trees. Nobody listens to the trees anymore, right?
Mm.
And then you have
Right.
this whole concept of the Ents. I don't know if you're a fan of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Have you ever encountered anything close in an experience? I mean, you just mentioned the grumpy old tree, which
Hmm.
it's fascinating because trees, in a sense, some of the trees we were just looking at on your site reminded me of elephants. And in fact, I saw an image of an elephant in one of them, and they almost
That's
have the
that
same kind of skin tone. And it's an elephant and
that
oak, you know.
that tree is probably, it's actually called elephant oak.
Oh,
There is one of
really?
those trees. It's called elephant oak because it has the trunk and the face.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so regarding Tolkien, I'm very much a fan. He obviously was lived in Oxford and studied there. And that's where I did my undergraduate degree. And again, as if by chance, recently, I think it was last year, I had a chap reach out. So he's taken the job as head groundsman at Magdalen College. So
Mm.
Magdalen College is one of the old colleges of Oxford University. I think it was founded around 1480, which is an
Wow.
old one. Certainly not
Hmm.
the oldest. Some of them date back to the 1200s and
Wow.
1100s. So
Right.
there is just this incredible history in Oxford and this magic. I heard someone recently say that it sits on particular ley lines and
Hmm.
it's one of the most magical places in Britain. And no surprise, therefore, that Tolkien's works and C.S. Lewis with his Narnia and Philip Pullman, they're all Oxford-based people.
Sure.
Um, so Magdalen College, I didn't know this, but they actually have 90 acres of land in the centre of Oxford, and that includes an old deer park. And then there's a walk which is called Addison's Walk.
Hmm.
And Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they used to walk along Addison's Walk. It's a circular route around the old deer park and the old water meadow near the river and discuss their various projects. And as it happens, the new head groundsman there reached out saying, asking for some of my trees and would it be possible to buy 4 of my oaks? And they're now planted along Addison's Walk.
Hmm.
So there's this kind of
That's awesome.
wonderful connection to that. And then another thing that was rather wonderful, as if by chance, again, I was at the Oxford University Botanic Garden AGM. I don't know if you have AGMs in America. That's the annual general meeting where the friends of the Botanic Garden get together and,
Okay.
talk about the finances and
Yeah.
election of
Fundraiser
committee
kind
members
of
and
thing.
so on
Right.
and
Sure.
fundraising and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So 2022 was the 400th anniversary of the founding of the Botanic Garden in 1622. And the man who provided the funding towards it 400 years ago, called Sir Henry Danvers, used to live at a stately home called Cornbury Park, which is about 5 miles from where I live and relatively near Oxford. So I went along to this AGM and I was having a chat with the director of the Botanic Garden, who I'd met once before, nearly 30 years ago, on a undergraduate field trip. And he was just asking me what I did. And I said, well, I sort of have a landscaping business and I do research into beetles and I do botanical conservation and I also grow oak trees. And he said, oh, well, I must put you in touch with our curator. And so I arranged to go for a walk with the curator who lived at a little village near me. And we were just wandering through I suppose it was a barley or a wheat field one summer day. And he said, well, we've been trying to think of a tree. We want to do a ceremonial tree planting for the 400th anniversary of the Botanic Garden. And it was delayed a year due to the restrictions that the so-called government were putting on people. So they decided it'd be best to delay things a year. So this was summer last year, 2023. And they had a year to think of a tree. They couldn't think of a tree. They couldn't think of an appropriate tree. And I said, well, I'm growing these oak trees. And I think he thought maybe I had a few little, like in a yogurt pot by my back door sort of thing, So
Right.
no, it's a bit more professional than that. We've
Sure.
got, proper big trees that are 8 years old now and they're 3 or 4 meters tall and they're at a nursery nearby. And he came to have a look and he was like, wow, those are proper trees. I said, yeah, those are proper trees.
Hmm.
And we were having this conversation and the topic turned to Cornbury Park and the fact that the founder of the Botanic Garden had lived there. And I just had a little flashbulb go off, going, as it happens, the second place I went to collect acorns was Cornbury Park,
Hmm.
which was difficult because it's very private. They don't normally let people in there.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the trees which I collected from is estimated to be at least 800 years old, and
Wow.
it's very near the house. So it's easy to assume or presume or infer things. Um, yeah, but I think it's quite reasonable to infer that the owner, Sir Henry Danvers, would have known that tree.
Hmm.
He was obviously keen on plants, which is why he founded the Botanic Garden. And that tree would have been 400 years old at the time, would have been a very big tree at that time.
Does it
And
have a
so as it
name, that
happens,
tree?
uh, well, I've called it Holly's Oak, which is the
Holly's
name
Oak.
of the estate manager's dog.
Okay. Well,
So
that makes
it
sense.
doesn't. And actually, the photograph, it is on the website. The photograph, you can just about make me out underneath it. And just behind me, you can actually see Holly the dog, but it's quite hard to see. Maybe it's not on that. Oh, actually, it's actually the one that's the one on the top left. It's that one there. If you actually, you can just about see me. You can see a pair of legs.
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And just behind me is the dog,
Oh,
Holly the
is
dog,
that a
little black
terrier?
dog. Yeah,
Looks
that's it.
Scottish Terrier.
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know what type of dog it is. Could
Okay.
be.
Kind of looks like it. That's interesting because the Russells had a Scottish Terrier
Oh, that's
named,
interesting.
oh, what was the name of it? Kind of almost a 60s, 70s-ish reference. Jimmy Love was the name of the dog.
Yeah,
Jimmy Love. Yeah.
that's great.
Hmm.
Um, so then what happened is they bought one of my trees, and we had the most remarkable day, which started off with a church service in the university church on the High Street in Oxford, and then a procession of so the university chancellor, the vice chancellor, so those are the sort of heads of the university, and all these dignitaries then sort of did a ceremonial procession all the way down the high street to the Botanic Garden. There must have been 100 of us, and then had a ceremonial planting of this tree. And then the funniest thing is it turned out that Oxford Botanic Garden didn't have a Quercus robur, the English oak, didn't have it in their collection. So it was also a species that they didn't actually have in their collection. So
Wow.
that's rather nice.
And this was one that you grew from the sapling,
Yeah,
and they picked that
from
to
the
be
acorns.
planted ceremonially. Well, that
Yeah,
that
that
sounds
was
like you're definitely on the right path, because how often do you meet a chancellor and vice chancellor of a ancient university? Number one, but number two, you're part of the procession, and so the planting, how was that? Was it pomp and circumstance, as the English are known for, proper being
absolutely,
they'd use as well?
absolutely. Well, actually, you can see it on if you go to the website again, you'll see if you go to projects, I think there's a couple of photographs on there. So if you go to yeah, there you go, Oxford Botanic Garden.
Okay, all right.
So that's me. If you click on there, there should be a little bit more information.
Okay, yeah, yeah, very nice.
And there's a picture of me with the Chancellor of the university,
I'll be
Chris
darned.
Patton. So he was actually a former politician. He was the last governor of Hong Kong before the
Huh,
British handed it back to China in
okay,
1997, I think it was.
right.
Uh, there you go. There's a full picture of the tree. So
Aha.
that's the parent oak, the mother oak.
Yeah, I'd say that's a
That's a
Scottish
magnificent.
Terrier. Sure looks like one. But yeah, that's a beauty. My goodness.
Yeah, it really
That's
is.
got to be what, a circumference in that trunk of goodness.
I think it's 8.9 meters. So uh
I just love oaks. I've always loved oaks.
do the maths on that.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Really awesome.
Yeah, nearly 3 meters across, nearly 3 meters in diameter. And then another project that I'm doing, which I'll be talking about tonight, is again with the university, is I collected 1,200 acorns in autumn 2022, and I donated them to supporters of the. So the university owns a woodland, which is 1,000 acre woodland. It's one of the most scientifically studied woodlands on Earth. They've had Oxford University PhD students going through there for, gosh, don't know, at least 50 years, probably more, studying all different things. And they're creating a new woodland. It's called Bearwood, Bear, Bearwood. And
Hmm.
I donated the acorns, which I collected from two very old trees in Oxfordshire for their supporters to go and collect. So it sounded like great fun. They had little depots around Oxford, and people go and pick up their acorn, and have been growing those now for the last 2 years, and they'll come back. I think it was going to be the end of last year, but it's going to be the end of this year. They're going to come back and plant up this new woodland. Yeah,
Wow.
that's one of the trees on the left, me sitting underneath it, that I collected the
Wow.
seeds from.
They're so mighty.
They're
There's
fantastic.
a few words to describe the mightiness of oaks. That's beautiful.
I do find it hard to put it into words sometimes, the experience. It's just a joy for me, an absolute joy and a pleasure. Uh, and it feels like a responsibility of
Mhm.
some sort, that I am being asked to do something that hasn't always been very clear to me, but as I take each step, it seems to just unfold. And yeah, I think it's going to be something really. The thing I find these days, having worked a lot in conservation, is that there's so much doom and gloom in the world about so-called climate change, ecological destruction, and of course, without doubt, I've seen in my time working in Central Africa, I've seen devastation of original forest that's now just oil palm or banana
Mhm.
plantation or rubber or whatever it is,
Right.
and it's really tragic. Um, and the whole, I don't really want to get into climate change because I don't think I agree with what the mainstream narrative is about that.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and if anything, it seems to be a sort of divide and rule, divide and conquer strategy to get two opposing camps fighting and squabbling.
Right.
And I've been very careful and deliberate that this oak project or story or adventure, whatever it is, it's nothing. It's not about any of that. It's not about conservation. It's not about DNA. It's not about climate change. It's certainly not about carbon. It's really a celebration and a recognition of, as you say, the mightiness of these trees,
Hmm.
and bringing some of this kind of deeper knowledge, I suppose, to the people, to just ask them to consider it. Because why is it that so many people are, love Lord of the Rings and the Ents and so on and so forth?
Hmm.
There's a depth of knowledge somewhere within people that they're happy to go and watch in the cinema or read the book. But what about the reality? How do they really see a tree? Uh, so it's going to be interesting to see what feedback I get from that level. And to answer your point earlier about if I had any strange experiences about Ents, well, I had one strange experience, which was for the first few years I was working with a 90-year-old James, who was growing the seeds for me. He called me Peregrine. And I couldn't work out why he was calling me Peregrine because it's not my name.
Right.
My
Peregrine
name's
Duke.
Benedict.
Right.
And I asked somebody about that, and they said, "Well, you really need to look into that symbolically." and and as you've just said, it was like, oh, wait a minute, who was the guy who went into Fangorn to connect
Right.
with the Ents to bring them into the battle against Saruman? Oh
Right.
yeah, that was Peregrine Took.
Indeed.
So whether or not that's part of what I'm doing, I couldn't say. But perhaps it is.
Well, this is fascinating. Um, I have to ask you, could you share just a little bit about the process of, because just looking at this, and I'm only familiar with the site as of less than an hour ago. And so we have basically, I've gotten home and settled in myself. I had quite a bit of catch up to do and have just now, over the past 24 hours, started responding to a slurry of emails that have come in from people I've given cards to, or people from the workshop, such as yourself. And it's really great to be able to connect and communicate. But I'm very interested in how hard or difficult would it be for someone like me with zero experience of growing an acorn, for instance? Now, in our little area here on 40 acres, we have many oaks, white oaks, red oaks, post oaks, black oaks, there's pretty much every kind of oak tree. The white oaks are beautiful in the sense that the deer and the white oak have a relationship where, you know, it's not every year that the white oak flourishes with an acorn bounty, but the deer, whenever there is, I'd say every other year or every 3 years, it seems that the white oaks here really provide a lot of acorns. And then the deer, of course, come, they start eating the acorns, and squirrels and such. But for someone like me who's got zero experience, how hard is it to learn to sprout an acorn, number one? Do you have any classes? Have you ever thought of maybe giving a class, maybe a tutorial on your website that you could even charge like a monthly, or even just a by the view, say $3.99 to view a 1 hour class on how to sprout an acorn and how to nurse it and grow it until it's, ready to plant? Is there anything in your repertoire that you have in terms of teaching people how to do this? And if not, have you thought about making something?
Well, I think it's a very important question, because part of what I've been thinking about is, how am I sharing this knowledge with people? Um, so it feels good tonight to be doing a lecture at last. It's like, okay, good. I'm
Mm,
ready to start to spread this information more widely, more generally. In terms of specifically about how to grow acorns, I haven't done anything. I think it's something that would be good. Um, I'm kind of at the moment quite occupied with my sort of day-to-day work. I have a landscaping business.
okay.
I would love for the oaks to become my day-to-day, but at the
Mm,
moment it's a side project that's fundamentally central to what I'm doing, but it's still not the main thing, day-to-day
not yet.
speaking.
Not yet.
Um, but it's relatively straightforward. Now, I can't speak specifically to American oaks because, of course, there are many more species in America. We only have two species in England. In fact,
Oh,
there are
okay.
some scientists who claim that the two species are actually just one very, very variable species. I
Interesting.
don't know. It's but I do know that so oak as a genus of plants has around 400 to 500 species. Funnily enough, Mexico is the center of diversity for oaks. I think there's well over 100 species in Mexico. In America, you have different species that are in different groups of the genus,
Hmm.
and they grow differently. So my understanding, so the oaks that we have here in the UK, and you can see this in nature. So the tree drops the acorn within a relatively short space of time. It's normally quite wet in the autumn. Then the leaves start to fall and create like a litter that covers the acorn, and the root germinates pretty quickly. And then it kind of anchors the acorn to the ground and then pulls it down.
I see.
Whereas
Yeah.
in America, I know there are some oaks where the acorn does not germinate in the autumn. It germinates, or the fall, as you call it, germinates in the spring.
Hmm.
Um, so there would need to be, if I was to do a video or something like that, I'd have to take that into consideration
Right.
that not all oaks are equal. But
Yeah.
the general principles are fairly straightforward, that it's very easy to grow them in a pot, a container of compost. Just use a fairly standard kind of compost mix, as we call it. I'm not sure what you call compost in America, probably something else.
It's similar.
Um,
Yeah. We've got basically topsoils available. There's organics, of course. The thing I don't
yeah.
like about a lot of the store-bought topsoils, like from a garden department at, one of these box chain, is that they tend to have a lot of plastic, shredded
Right.
plastic bags
Oh,
in the
okay.
compost or in the
Oh, okay.
topsoil. So I tend to avoid that. I actually order my own topsoil to be delivered in a 2-ton dump bed from a
Yeah.
local place that gathers their own topsoil, and then I buy my own. We make our own compost. We're just getting into that more and doing that. But yeah, it's an involved process to really get your land up and running in terms of even landscaping. Takes a lot, especially if you're going to do decorative beds and things like that. But so yeah, you have to really, I guess, account for the longitude and latitude. It looks like for much of England, you're in a more northern climate than a lot of the U.S., which we here have southern oaks, of course, that flourish in more of the southern United States, and then more of a northern. But what's interesting too is that I was going to add on with the white oaks that we have around. There are many small oak trees that I've seen, and we've got a whole flurry of different kinds of flora and fauna. But in terms of oaks, it's just it's neat to see these smaller oaks growing, and I try not to trample them or harm them in any way, but rather nurture them if possible. And it's a process you have to learn about. But I mean, I imagine you've encountered quite a lot of things in landscaping that, and how much do your clients know about do they know you're into, raising these oaks, and have any contacted you on that end to plant oaks in their yards or things like that?
Landscaping clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do let them know. Um, but most of the trees it's a kind of word of mouth thing now. So I've had landscape designers I had one who bought 20 of my trees to help restore an ancient oak wood pasture at a
Mm,
stately home where they
okay.
had lots of very old oaks, but it had kind of fallen into disrepair. And if a tree blew over, it just got left and just sort of disintegrated or removed. And
Right.
bit by bit, they were losing the feel of the old landscape that was 400 or 500, 600 years old potentially. I mean, one thing that's interesting about England is that we're blessed to have more ancient oaks than the rest of Europe combined,
Right.
and that's partly due to the kind of aristocracy getting into these. Um, I don't know whether you could call it competitive trends, but back in the Middle Ages, we're talking back all the way back to the 1200s, 1300s, the stately homes would be interested in creating deer parks so that they could hunt the deer, but also for their guests or the nobility who were traveling through, who would come to stay, would have a royal pastime to enjoy themselves with. And as it happens, many of these medieval deer parks still exist and are, in many instances, still at the same properties. And as a sort of byproduct of that, the oaks, which might have only been 100 years old then, some of them are still there, and now they're 800, 900 years old. So this kind of
Mm,
hunting trend has sort of inadvertently been a great force for conservation of these ancient trees, which is rather wonderful. Um, yeah. So and that happened again in the Tudor period around Elizabeth I, Henry VIII. There was another kind of wave of trend of establishing these deer parks. So so we're rather blessed, and there are still discoveries being made. I actually helped to add a 9 meter plus oak to the list, which hadn't been. The owners knew about it, but no one else knew about it. And I think I may have possibly found another one. So it's kind of fun too to it's like a little bit of a treasure hunt to find out where are some of these ancient trees that aren't really yet very widely known. Um, and one of my intentions is to collect acorns from every county in England. So I've been
mm,
to about 20 now, which is a bit less than half of the counties. So I can
wow.
say I've got oaks from all over England. And I do have people who say, do you have an oak from Somerset or do you have an oak from Oxfordshire? And I go, yes, I do. And I think people like that.
That's fantastic. So are you cataloging the various acorns and locations? Do you actually keep a written catalog or digital that you're using to keep track of all the different specimens that you obtain?
Yeah. So how I do it is every time I collect acorns, I will give that a code. So in my botanical adventures, which started in 1996 in the highlands of Cameroon, what botanists tend to do is when you're collecting a specimen, you give it a code. So for me, Benedict Pollard 1, BP1. So
Mm,
every specimen that I collected would be pressed and dried and have a label attached to it, BP1, and then that can be referenced to the notes that I take with the GPS reading, giving its geolocation and color and altitude and any other information that might be relevant. So I just carried that process on. I think the first acorns I collected was BP 1552,
Hmm.
and I'm up to about 1/8 something now. So if I go to a tree and collect 100 acorns, they'll all have the same code. If the next tree only has one acorn on it, it will have a different code, and I'll just need one label, whereas the tree before I'll need 100 labels. So every tree will have a label on it, which gives me the connection to the provenance of the mother oak. As I like to say, we don't know who the father is because they're wind pollinated. So it could be
Yeah,
any old oak. But that's, and people sometimes use that as a sort of prejudice against this process as being, well, it could be any old oak. You don't know that that's going to definitely have good characteristics for a solid tree. And I say, well, that's not really what this is about. This is something else. This isn't a forestry program. I'm not trying to grow trees for harvesting timber. It is a
sure.
story, and an energetics thing,
Right.
um, with intention, and that's a very different thing. So, but I can certainly guarantee which mother oak they came from,
Hmm.
and that's
Fantastic.
all. So yeah, that's all kept digitally. One thing I'd like to do is start to map where I've been. Um, I mean, I know where I've been, but to actually do that and put that on the website, and then with the permission of any purchasers, start to see where they've been planted as well, because that's
Hmm.
when it's going to get really interesting. And also, that means I can start to kind of target parts of the country where I haven't been, but also where I haven't planted any yet, and start to see if people are interested in creating a fairly even grid of
Yeah.
planted trees.
So oak propagation scientifically by, you could look at what areas are lacking oak growth and target those areas. I have to ask, and I know you said that for the states you have to look at the acorn. What time of year does it gestate? So you'd have to tailor a class if you were to create a class, for the
Hmm.
U.S. versus England because of the different species and locales and different germination requirements for an acorn, for instance. But that would be fascinating. I'd love to take a class like that just to because I've always been called to want to grow trees myself. I've always more or less had excuses as to why I'm too busy or there's always other things going on, but I would make time to plant, oak trees, for instance, or even maples or whatever kinds of trees. I have tried in the past to do some pine trees, but those didn't work out very well. So
Hmm.
I do have sort of a green thumb. I'd say half green. My dad had a very green thumb. He could grow anything and he throw something and he could spit on it and it'd grow, for God's sakes.
Hmm.
But some people just have that gift, my sister too. But I have to ask, how many oaks have you planted since you began this adventure? And, like in the United States, we have this thing called Arbor Day, which I don't even know if they do it anymore, to be quite honest. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe some schools do. I don't know that the inner city school systems or with the state of our education system today, if they even care about it anymore. But is there a similar thing in England, maybe because you're already friends and acquainted with, the chancellors of different universities and such, that there might be a similar day like Arbor Day where kids are given a small sapling and then their task is to go home and plant it. Have you anything like that? And then just answer your best guess. How many oaks have you planted so far in this endeavor?
So I personally haven't planted a huge number because I'm mostly growing them and then selling them or donating them. But I've helped plant three memorial trees, helped the one at the wedding, um, and then most of the rest will have been sold or donated to other people to plant.
And
And
how
I
many
guess
would you estimate that to be?
probably probably around 200 so far. So it's
Wow.
not about the volume; it's not a huge number, but
Sure.
again, with intention. These are planted with
Right.
intention. So we're not talking about, there are a lot of these projects where they say, hey, we planted 200,000 trees. And
Right.
you go and look at them and they're just all in rows. And then they don't look after them very well. And then in X number of years, you have to then cut a whole load out, thin it out.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's a very different thing energetically. This is about growing very special trees and planting them with care and for
A lot of
special
intention
occasions.
goes into this.
Yeah. Um, but I currently have, I think, 4 or 5 people. I haven't confirmed orders yet, but I've got one semi-confirmed for 76 trees to
Wow.
be planted in a parkland on a house in the north of England that's been in the same family for over 1,000 years. It's the 32nd generation owner. Pre-Battle of
Goodness.
Hastings, they've been on the same land, and they want 76 of my trees to help populate the parkland around the house. So that's really special. And they want to make an educational thing about that. So their whole ethos is this is a sanctuary for well-being and upliftment of the spirit.
Mhm.
And so it will be done as part of an educational program to take people on walks around the trees and talk about the sort of things we're talking about.
Fabulous.
Um, I have another estate in the north of England where I've collected acorns, and again, they'd like to create some new oak groves in their large parkland. I don't know how many they want. I think we're looking at another probably few hundred trees that are about to go out in the next month, hopefully. Um, in terms of sort of having a day Arbor Day equivalent. I don't think we have that sort of thing. There are a lot of organizations in England who do tree planting with school children, that kind of stuff. Um, and I haven't really thought about organizing that other than the project I mentioned earlier, Bear Wood with Oxford University, because of course, an oak tree requires space. So
Mhm.
many people who would like an oak tree just don't have the space. Whereas with the new woodland, they have the space. So at the moment, they have 6 acres that they're looking to plant up. So I'm saying to people, if you'd like to buy a tree, and it could be a memory of someone, then you can come and help plant it in the autumn. We'll all go up there together and start to do that. So I think that would be a lovely experience for people to be able to come and help plant their own tree.
That's fantastic. It reminds me of all this talk that you just mentioned that oaks like their own space. It makes me think of Ayn Rand's individual versus the collective, right? That the oak is, and even you take a Neil Peart of Rush, the band Rush. He wrote the song "The Trees," and one of the lyrics from "The Trees" is the oaks can't actually. Is it? Um, the maples form their unions. Or wait, the oaks can't help their feelings if they like the way they're made, and they wonder why the maples can't be happy in their shade. So the maples form their unions and demanded equal rights. The oaks are just too lofty. We will make them give us light. But the oaks can't help their feelings if they like the way they're made, and they wonder why the maples can't be happy in their shade. So it's sort of like, as an individual, you're towering over the maples who want equal rights to tower themselves. But so it's just an interesting dichotomy there of the individual and the collective, and especially in what you just said, the oaks like their space. They like, to be alone in their own little area, and they grow wide and they grow mighty. I just thought of how that works with the individual, and how collectives sort of don't grow as tall, you could say,
Right.
or require
Right.
as much space.
And actually, there's a lot of discussion going on amongst different scientists here in the UK, different ecologists about what was the original habitat here going back 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And there are two opposing camps, and some say, yeah, it was all covered in forest, the wild wood, and others say, no, it wasn't forest, it was sort of more open wood pasture with some closed canopy forest. But then, particularly the oaks, and they do grow like this now. You can see it in sort of fully grown oak in a woodland wood pasture, which is sort of dotted around with grazing animals underneath. And they do say that the oak is a solar being, that it likes the sun. And I certainly notice that if you do grow oaks in the shade, they get a bit scraggly and spindly, and
Mm.
they don't particularly grow very well. Whereas a fully grown open oak in the sun is something to behold. Some of the finest specimens are these great open growing. They're not all like that, but some of the best ones I've seen are,
Yeah.
for sure.
We had a massive oak just right up the hill from us, and it got struck by lightning about 6 years ago. It was a massive lightning bolt, and I remember the storm, and I remember it was during a May storm, 2016 or so, 17. And then I began to notice as I drove to town, as we drive right by it, but that tree began to die over the years. It came back less and less green, and then only till there was a small patch of green on top that was left. And then around 2019, it was just barren for the, and in 2021 or 2020, my neighbor next door who owns that area, he asked if I wanted it. He said it's been struck by lightning. And so I said, yeah, I can use the wood because we burn wood here. And I always try to use trees that are dead, down, or have been cleared, and I pick up that wood. I don't like to cut living things, put it that way. But so I began to cut this tree up, and then I had read that if you make tincture from oak that was struck by lightning, that it has special healing properties. So we made
Mm.
what I called an oak lightning tincture, and I take that every so often. And I used to have bad oak allergies, and when I started taking this lightning tincture, my oak allergies stopped. And maybe
Mm.
it's sort of a homeopathic approach where you introduce a little of what you're allergic to, and you develop a resistance, you could say, to it, or you get used to it, and it no longer has that, that kind of adverse reaction. But I haven't had any problems, and usually the oaks pop around here in May into the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of June, and there's just a green film literally covering all the automobiles, all the patio furniture. So it's just a really heavy blanket of pollen from the oak trees, because when they make themselves known, and they will create a layer of dust all over the place, and you can't not know when the oaks are blooming. But
That's so
so it's
interesting.
fascinating.
That's why I love these kind of conversations, because I'm
Mm.
always learning as well. And
Right.
we don't really have that experience with the oak pollen that I'm aware of in the UK.
Mhm.
And the oak tincture, the oak lightning oak tincture
Yeah,
that
oak
sounds
lightning.
wonderful. Interestingly, I had a chat with David Avocado Wolf at an
Mhm.
Acapulco about oaks, and he was saying that one of his favorite kind of superfoods is actually that he makes from acorns of red oak that suits him. And one of the things that I really would like to do more is explore all the different uses of oaks for health, because
Mhm.
it's not generally considered an edible tree, but if it
Sure.
certainly is. Um, and it has various properties. I even a friend of mine, she works with different plant spirits, and she is talking about when smudging. So we're kind of used to white sage as being
Sure.
the plant that's kind of widely known. She was talking about oak leaves is one of the most powerful smudges,
Mm.
and if you're in a house where the energies are so sort of deeply absorbed that they almost didn't go into the brickwork. That oak leaves are one of the few things that are powerful enough to draw that energy out when you do a smudging with intention. So there's
Mhm.
so much that's not widely known or spoken about the oak and its kind of medicinal properties or energetic properties, and that's something that I know down the line I'm going to be doing more and more on that as it
Right.
unfolds.
We've got to get into the annals of the of Oxford's library and find those Druidic books about all the oaks and their usefulness and uses. See if they'll let you in.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, could be.
Read
I
the
mean,
books that
I'm
C.S.
slightly,
Lewis and Tolkien read, that gave them their ideas for stories.
yeah.
And imagine there's anecdotal things about oaks that are only novel to England, one could say, because it seems that that admiration and recognition of the mightiness of the trees. I know that so many great authors, especially in the English vernacular, have touched upon the magic of and the power of the oaks and the trees in general. But certainly, there's some lore to that.
I think that's an interesting idea. Is I hadn't really thought about perhaps perhaps there's correspondence in the archives, perhaps at Merton College, which is where Tolkien was, and
Hmm.
C.S. Lewis was at Magdalen, the college I mentioned earlier. Perhaps there are sort of little explored letters, notes. I don't know. Yeah, that could be so interesting. I always have a slight resistance to the Druidic cultures, in as much as I read a book called Blood and Mistletoe by Ronald Hutton. He was a professor of history at Bristol University. I believe he's actually now at Oxford. And he kind of pointed out that most of modern Druidry is actually just made up because
Yeah.
it was severed effectively by the Romans,
Right.
2,000 years ago, which isn't to say that it doesn't have relevance or truths within it. But my sort of feeling is, rather than maybe, like you said, being an oak, being an individual rather than part of the collective, is that I'm kind of doing this directly with the trees rather than as part of some organization, which will have its own sort of flavors and nuances that perhaps I don't really tune in with. Um, but it's perfectly possible to tune in directly to the trees, as I alluded
Mhm.
to earlier. There are
And
ways of doing
you
that,
could write
which
a constitution for your own organization and create with that same respect that it's not for us that we do this, it's for the trees, it's for that purpose. But I see lots of potential in your future. I
that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I suppose we ought to probably draw it to a close now, or soon,
think
because
that'd be great.
I
I
have to
do want to just
finalize
say,
my lecture.
yeah, do just want to say you've got a great site. People should check it out. You want to share that site in any way that people can contact you?
Yeah, I mean it's mightyfineoaks.com. So as it says, mightyfineoaks.com. And there's an email address on there, which is just Benedict at mightyfineoaks.com is the simplest way to get in touch. I have noticed I need to update the website a little bit because some of the pictures you can't see the whole thing. Yeah, there you go. Benedict at mightyfineoaks.com.
Mhm.
So
I think
anyone's welcome to reach out, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any emails, any questions.
it's great work you're doing, and it's so good to hear that you've had your own little bit of let's just say influence from say a Walter and Leo Russell, and that you have some of the course material and certainly any project you take on, if you have that philosophy, it's a living philosophy, much like a living tree, and it's got firm roots and also it reaches down into the dark and up into the light simultaneously. But there is a great power in that, and any organization that you build, or as an individual, you build yourself as well. And I think when you draw upon that inner power and live the philosophy of wisdom, which is it's alive, I would say, much like the tree, and it's to be respected, the process of your own growth, and what you shall become. But I think you're doing a great job, great work, and you're certainly a tree of your own, you could say. And may the fruits of your labors be such that many oaks come into being that wouldn't have otherwise been here. And just keep at it and you cannot fail that which you put your mind and heart to doing. And so I wish you all the best, Benedict.
Matt, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks so much for your time. It's good to see you and connect.
And you as well.
There is unrest in the forest, there is trouble with the trees, for the maples want more sunlight and the oaks ignore their pleas.